All right.
Okay,
Tonight we're going to talk about Star Trek, the original series. We're going to kind of
wait a
start.
minute.
Oh, okay.
Wait a minute. It's acting up right now. Oh, come on. Why is it acting up? Every time OBS comes up, the computer acts up for some reason.
Huh.
Wait a minute. Okay, let's do this again here.
Okay, actually, I had already started, so we're going on mine, I think.
Okay, all right,
I got to look and see if I'm going. Yeah, it looks like I am.
all right.
Of course, I need 2 subscribers, so that's not going to affect anything. I did pick up a couple apparently during the evening.
That's good. I probably they were listening. And probably they described, I guess.
Yeah, which I thank them. They
All
probably
right.
don't even know I'm going, but I do
Yeah,
thank them for showing up.
yeah. And now it says Google Chrome not responding. Shit. Now we going.
Okay. Well,
Wait
tonight
a
we're
minute.
going to talk. Oh, sorry.
It's been screwing up as of late. However, all right. Now it says exit condition. All right. And it's going to take a long while because my computer's been screwed. I don't know if it's the OBS or whatever it is.
Well,
Maybe I have to get.
you're actually
Am I
showing
what?
up.
That's good to hear.
Of course, you don't have
So it's
anybody
actually showing
watching.
for right now, not right now.
But yeah, I see your thumbnail.
Yeah, I see there. Yeah. I used the thumbnail from the animated series from the 1970s. There, that came years afterwards.
Yeah.
Yeah, and of course, as you can tell by the thumbnail and the title of the show, we are taking a look at the original Star Trek series, which ran from 67 to 1969.
Yep.
Of course, we know the series like the back of our hands, and we got somebody calling in right now, Jeebus the God,
Who would that be?
and almost awkward. Oh, he's the guy I talked to a couple of times before on here on Skype, and I'm going to have to message him a little bit later on during the show and let him know that we're doing this program.
Oh,
He's a
okay.
cool guy,
Okay.
yeah. But as you know, Star Trek, the original series, and ran from I guess was it 68 or was it no 66 to 1969.
Yeah, it only ran 3 years.
Yeah, yeah, and then ran on the NBC network. From I take it, I understand.
And I believe there's 78 episodes, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it's true there.
And what we'll do is the crew remained pretty much intact. I mean, you had
Yeah,
Kirk, you had McCoy, and you had Spock that were pretty much throughout the entire thing, other than the pilot,
yeah.
which we'll
Yes,
discuss that in a little bit separately. And then
yeah.
they had, of course, the secondary people like Sulu, uh,
Hmm.
Uhura,
Hmm.
Chekhov, Nurse Chapel, and
That's
for
right.
and for some reason somebody's escaping my mind because I know
Let's
the
see, George Takei, Walter
yeah, that was
Coney.
Sulu.
Oh, yeah. Who's right now is who's often trends on the social media right now with this infamous "Oh my" quote there.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. He showed up in quite a few episodes of The Big Bang Theory. Actually,
Yeah, I know.
that was interesting. But
Yeah, I know.
anyway, we won't
Yeah,
really touch on the pilot because we're going to get to that when they when we get into the episodes a little bit later because it's going to show
yes,
up in the menagerie.
yes,
But the first episode that showed on TV was one called The Man Trap, which
yes.
basically involved the three Kirk, McCoy, and Spock beaming to a planet where a guy was there with his wife who happened to be an old flame of McCoy's.
Yes.
and it turns out that his wife is actually some kind of creature that
Wow.
feeds on salt, and but can
Wow, that's
take on,
something there.
yeah, but he can take on the form of a person, so everybody sees it differently.
Like a
And
shapeshifter.
sort of, but it was kind of different from the shapeshifter. But yeah, it's probably a good description of it. But
Yeah.
I would rate that one as a, actually, because it was the first one, probably a very good episode. Uh, Maybe good, but I'm going to go with very good on that one. I think that was a very good episode. Number two was one called Charlie X, which was about them finding a teenager on a planet, and they bring him aboard the Enterprise because he's wanting to get away from that planet because he's worried about apparently some kind of beings who uh, he says treats him bad and such. But the problem
Yeah.
is this kid has extraordinary powers and can make people go away and change them. He can do all sorts of things. And he's starting to cause problems on the ship, and they're trying to figure out what they're going to do about it and think about taking him back. And then suddenly, the people that were there watching him explained they were sorry he got away, but he's too dangerous for mankind, and they need to take him back. And that's a good episode. I'd call that also a good episode. And anytime I say good or above, it's worth seeing. There's going to be very few of them that I'm going to call in the original series fair or poor. In fact, I don't
Yes.
think I have a poor one at all. But
Oh.
we'll know when we get to the second and third season. But I know in the first there's going to be no fairs. Fairs are good, poor. The third episode, one called "Where No Man Has Gone Before," which is actually the second pilot, and this one involves them going to the edge of the universe and running into a force, which basically kind of changed two people on board who had high levels of ESP, and it made them have extraordinary powers that were starting to cause problems. And they came near a planet, and they were going to leave them there on the planet. And the two of them figured it out, and the one guy got really, well, almost, guess you'd call him godlike, and started getting really bad. And they ended up, well, I don't want to reveal what happened. That's one you got to watch. This one's a very good episode. It tells you what happens when people get more power than they should have.
Yeah. They over and they had, and that power often, excuse me, and that power often over consumes them
And
at
that's exactly
times.
what happened here. It
Yeah.
got to the point where they thought they were better than everybody else, basically,
Yeah.
especially the
Yeah.
guy.
Yeah. And the moral of that is don't let any power get to your head, basically.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Then the next one they showed was one called The Naked Time, which
Hmm.
Spock and a crew member beamed down to a planet where they had a research team there, and everything was frozen,
Wow.
and all the people were frozen kind of oddly, to say the least. And
Yes.
the crewman took off his glove that insulated him and scratched his nose, and somehow picked up
Yes.
virus for a good
Oh.
description. And
Uh-huh.
basically, it made him irrational when he got back on ship. And
Hard to cope with?
yeah, he became irrational, and he spread it because it was spread by touch. And so suddenly
Yeah.
the whole crew was starting to become irrational, which explained what happened on the planet.
Yeah.
And essentially, they ended up finding a way to counteract it, and they cured it. And that was a good episode, I think.
Interesting, like don't meddle with things you don't understand. Like when you're told not to touch something and you're kind of like you have to obey that rule basically, especially when you're in a different world where anything you touch can either contaminate something or you could get contaminated yourself.
Yeah. The next one's one called The Enemy Within, which is
Hmm.
an interesting one because there was some kind of thing that when they came up from a planet, Kirk split into two people. They didn't
Wow.
see it because the first one came off okay, and the second one showed up a little later when everybody was off. But there was a good, basically, it was a good Kirk and a bad Kirk. He split his good side from his bad side,
Oh, wow.
and basically caused problems on the ship because people couldn't figure out which Kirk they were
Which Kirk
talking.
was which? Yeah.
Because he'd go around and he'd do things irrationally that the bad one would, and people were like, "What the heck?" And the other Kirk,
Yeah.
they figured out he couldn't make any decisions because he didn't have the bad side to kind of counterbalance himself. And
Wow.
after a while, they both figured out that they needed each other. And
Yeah.
the bad Kirk figured out, well, I need the good Kirk to counteract me. And the good Kirk
And
figured out that he needed the bad Kirk to kind of help him
interact.
be strong.
Yes. Interact. Yes.
And
So the
this is also
mhm,
a very good episode.
yeah.
Because it
Because a
kind of
lot of
shows.
way because a lot of ways you and we talk about our bad side and getting rid of that, but at times we need our little bad side with us, to keep us in check and keep us strong, because you can't be a good guy can't be that squeaky clean all that time. People will take advantage of that.
Yeah, you'd like to, but it's just not rational.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Episode 6 was Mud's Women, which that's the first meeting with Captain Mudd. And he had a bunch of women on board the ship that he
Wow.
was taking to some miners to give them a home.
Captain Mud. Kind of. Man, remember, I'm thinking the phrase "my name is Mud"
Yeah, you
from
kind
the
of wonder about that.
yeah, I wonder. Yeah, it's because I'm thinking Porky Pig on then that one cartoon with Daffy Duck. Wait a minute, my name isn't DiMaggio. It's my name is ends in a puddle of mud. My name is Mud, and
Yeah,
mud spelled backwards is dumb.
yeah. But basically, they end up going to a mining colony, and Mud's trying to sell these women off, which they're all gorgeous,
Wow.
but there's a reason for it. They have some
Hmm.
kind of something that he has that transforms them from the plain Janes they are to gorgeous women.
Like a
And
spell.
yeah, sort of. That's probably a good explanation. And
Yeah.
so basically, somewhere along, the miners hide what they came for, which was, I think, corbomite, excuse me. And they hide it so that the women will get to stay. And somewhere along the line, at least one of the women starts to say, this isn't right. And she refuses to take the stuff and she turns back into the plain Jane. But in the meantime, the miners she was with liked her for who she was and didn't care about the fact that she wasn't beautiful anymore, but that she wasn't ugly, but she wasn't, she's kind of plain. And that kind of teaches us that sometimes it isn't looks, it's who the person is. And this was a very good episode, I thought. It taught
Hmm.
it it told us a lot. So yeah, I thought that was a very good episode. The next one was one called "What Are Little Girls Made Of," and this is our
Yes.
first glimpse into Nurse Chapel. They go to a planet where her boyfriend, fiance, whatever he was,
Yeah.
is down there, and her and Kirk go down, which the guy tells him only you two can come, but he goes ahead and did his usual thing. He brings along security, and the security guy ends up, well, like most of them do, gone. And she goes
I
and
see.
she contacts, they contact the doctor, and they find out things aren't exactly like they thought they were going to be. This episode also had Ted Cassidy in it as, well, I forgot the character's name, but he was kind of the guardian of all of it. And he's an android. And as they go along in this episode, they find out the doctor is
Yeah.
making androids because there's an android machine down there. So he's going to make an android of of Kirk, so that he can take over the Enterprise and slowly but surely make androids of all the crew members, so that he can have control. He's basically turned into the evil guy. And so as Kirk is being spun, I remember this, around to be made into an android. In his head, he's thinking something to warn him, and so he keeps saying, "Spock, you half-breed Vulcan," or what, or something like that, and just over and over. And the android picks it up. So when the android goes back up there and starts talking around, everybody, hey, everything's great. Let's go down and see the guy. He says he uses that phrase on Spock, and Spock figures out, wait, something's not right. And
Yeah.
they basically go down, they get everything fixed, and it turns out that this doctor was also an android. The real
Wow.
doctor died, so essentially they figured what was going on and got it fixed. You know how it goes.
I
Uh,
see.
this was at least a good episode, borderline very good. It might be very good,
Yeah.
but this is the first season was generally pretty good overall. Next episode is one called Miri, which they went to a planet that there's basically nothing but kids because the adults had all died off or become mutated, and
Wow.
the kids basically were
Run the
scared of.
show.
Yeah, they were basically scared of anybody that was a grown up.
Yeah.
And when the Enterprise came down there, of course they're all grown up.
Yep.
They had little
They freaked out.
yeah,
They freaked out.
and they figured out that the grown ups had come up with this solution that extended life, but at a cost. They
Mm.
they figured out all the kids were at least 300 years old because
Wow.
but they still grew. They just grew at a much slower pace. But when they reached
Wow.
puberty, the drug kicked in the bad side and killed them within 7 days of the time they reached puberty.
Wow.
And it took a
Kind of
awful
like
lot
the
of.
time, kind of like the timeless child that we hear on Doctor Who a few times in the past.
Yeah, and it took a little while to convince the kids that there was a problem because they were going to eventually, and they figured out how to cure that one and took care of it. Another good episode. It's worth watching. Actually, overall, the first season is good watching. The next one's called something was called Dagger of the Mind, and you know what? I'm going to have to look at that real quick.
Oh yeah, Dagger of the Mind. Kind of like a. That's an interesting title right there. Kind of like a title for some sort of a suspense novel or something like that.
Oh,
In
okay.
fact, it's kind of similar to the title Eye of the Needle, which was a movie that featured Donald Sutherland around 1980 or 81, if I remember.
Yeah. Okay. Now I know. This is one where they were near a planet that was kind of a place for the criminally insane, and they were trying to
Yes.
treat them. And the doctor there had come up with this thing that controlled them, and he kind of turned criminally insane himself.
Oh boy.
And essentially, he was causing problems down there. It's a good episode. It's worth watching.
Wow.
Uh, the next one was one called the Corbomite Maneuver, and this was one where the Enterprise was looking for Corbomite because that's one of the things they used to run the ship.
Yeah, that's her fuel.
And essentially, they ran across this huge ball with a pulsing alien head that warned
Hmm.
them that they were in trouble.
Wow.
He was going to have to do something about them, and
Giving them warnings.
they were trying to figure out a way to get away because it had him in a trap. And eventually, they got free, but Kirk decided let's go back and make sure we didn't cause any damage.
Right.
And they went back and they actually boarded this thing. Found out it was just one guy, which actually was Clint Howard.
Hmm.
He was a small alien, and he was basically trying to test them and figure out whether they were people that were he wanted to find out more about or whatever. And they struck up a good friendship. And he said he
Hmm.
wished that he could have a human on board. And Kirk had
Oh.
a understudy, I guess was a better description, that he volunteered and he stayed with the guy. And that was a very good episode, actually.
Wow.
It was
And now,
interesting.
when you speak of Clint Howard, are you speaking of Ron's brother?
Yes,
Oh, wow.
yeah, it was real interesting because he played the alien. Of course, he
And
was made up,
of
but
course, he was a teenager at this point, like Ron was. I take it.
yeah, well, and he was still small. I mean, he was
Yeah,
a small guy. Uh,
I see. Yeah,
so
because I
this
figure
was young.
because Clint Howard, we all know, is kind of like the underbelly of actors because he's been in all these movies that have been underrated and long forgotten. I know a movie called Evil Speak that he was in, and then back in 1981. And of course, the last time we heard of him, he was in the movie Blood Rain 3, the third raid. He has some sort of a German evil scientist, where I take it there.
Yeah, and he actually appeared on almost everything Ron Howard did somewhere.
Yeah, of
Uh, he was
course,
part of it.
that's family. Of course, that's
Yeah.
family.
So next on the list is the Menagerie, which is the only
Hmm.
two-part episode.
Okay.
And basically, the premise of this one was they Spock had and Kirk had gone to a Federation planet
Yeah.
and met up, and they found the original Star Trek pilot,
Oh.
Captain Pike of the Enterprise.
Oh yeah. That's I remember that now.
Yeah, and he was in this little beat box, for lack of a better thing to call, because he had been
Wow.
involved in a very bad accident of some sort, and basically all
Wow.
he was kept alive with a little beep car, whatever, and the only
Like a
communicate.
like a hover round when you think about it.
Yeah, and he rolled everywhere he went, but the only way he could
Like a
communicate.
with a wheelchair, but a little bit of fuel with attachments to his body,
Exactly.
like
Basically,
Darth Vader.
yeah, basically,
Darth Vader, but with oh, sorry, but without the hover round. Darth Vader still was able to walk and run and stuff,
yeah,
but he had to have a respirator.
and basically it would you could just see basically just his head and shoulders, and his head was badly deformed,
Wow!
from the burns and such. And
Holy shit!
the only communication he could do is he made his little cart beep once for yes, twice for no, or whatever it was. I don't remember. But at any
The
rate,
same, kind of like the same with Stephen Hawking when he got down with when he got Lou Gehrig's disease. He had to use some sort of a vice which either he twitches with his eye or with his mind or something. The words will come out through a speaker.
yeah. And what happens is Spock grabs Pike, takes him aboard the Enterprise, and starts to take off. And Kirk is still on ground, and so is this administrator that's down there. And they radio Kirk and tell him, "Hey, you better come get us." And Kirk said, "Okay." And he went and got him. And the rest of the two episodes involve Spock being on court martial, being tried with Kirk, this administrator guy, and Pike.
Wow.
And what they're doing is they're tr- kind of taking him through the trial. Why did he do this? And they go into the cage episode and bring it up, and the televisions are the ones that are showing him this episode while he's explaining what he's doing. And basically, this is where we see the cage. And we go over this and we find out Spock was a young officer on that ship. He wasn't first. That was actually Nurse Chapel playing that role, but she wasn't Nurse Chapel. She was just number
Yeah.
one. And it basically goes to the story of the cage and what was going on there. And this two-parter is worth watching. I'd call it a two or two. I don't do numbers. Very good.
Wow. All right.
And then the next one was Conscience of the King, which was about a touring troupe. And the suspicion was that the leader of this troupe was somebody called Kodos the Executioner, who was responsible for annihilations of whole populations on planets and such. And this troupe was just traveling, and he was basically in hiding. And it kind of goes through that and what's involved in all of that. This is a this is a good episode. I think this is a good episode. The next one was Balance of Terror, which was essentially a planet that was in between what we now find out is Klingon and Federation, and both groups were wanting this planet because it had valuable materials and was strategic. So Kirk and Spock land there to try to talk to the people and tell them, "Hey, join us. We're good guys, whatever." And then, of course,
Join the Federation.
yeah, and then the Klingons land and they used the way they did things then, which was terror people and all of that good stuff, that they did.
Intimidation, threats, and everything.
Right. And
Yeah.
then essentially, you know, Kirk and Spock were trying to stay away from the Klingons, and the Klingons were trying to
Keep away
force,
from them.
yeah, and to force the people to take. Well, no, the Klingons were actually looking for them,
Mm.
and essentially, what it ended up being is the people they were trying to get were a really advanced being who tried to get both of them to use common sense and quit doing this. And this is another good episode, actually, because it kind of taught us about how to get along with each other if we can, that sort of thing. Of course, we know
Yeah, I see.
many, many years in the future, the Klingons actually join the Federation.
I remember, yeah, they would become allies. That's what I found out when the Next Generation first started.
Yeah, because they didn't actually become allies until the next generation, or
Yeah,
sometime
until the
before.
end of that, and plus to the end of that one Star Trek movie, which one of the Klingons, when they finally captured Kirk, it was like, Kirk, I apologize, and they explained something went wrong with their accusations towards Kirk at that time.
Yeah, yeah. Next one was called Shore Leave. This was kind of a fun episode, I guess you'd say. Basically, they start imagining things on the planet. It's just their imaginations. Something's causing their imaginations to conjure up things.
My imagination is running wild.
That's basically what's going on here. This was a
Yep.
fun episode. It was good. I'd consider it good. It's fun to watch. And the next one was Galileo 7, which is kind of famous. That's the one about the seven people. Well, I'm trying to make sure I don't mix it with another episode. These were this was Spock and a crew that got stranded on an island, and of course Spock, the way he is, had
Yeah.
to do everything logically, and the people on board were getting madder and madder about it because there were giants there that were giving him problems. In fact, several of the people got killed, and they were starting to blame Spock for everything, and they were turning
Wow.
on him and such.
Hmm.
And they finally figured out a way to get the shuttle up where the Enterprise could see him, hopefully. And they figured out the Enterprise was starting to leave because they were getting discouraged. They couldn't find the Galileo 7. And Spock, in desperation, fired off the engines and stuff. And the Enterprise saw him and beamed him on board just before the ship exploded.
Wow.
And everybody was kind of like, "Hey, Spock, you kind of showed some emotion there. You did the desperation thing." And he said, "No, it was a logical thing to do at the time." And
Yeah.
Kirk kind of looked at him. Yeah, right. But
Hmm.
that's a good episode.
Yeah. All right. So, I mean, we didn't. Also, we need to talk about the impact Star Trek has made on on the pop culture.
Oh
I
yeah,
mean, there have been, yeah, because when you think about it, there's been 13 movies. There's been a lots of spin-off programs, including the Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Voyager. We had Enterprise with the guy who starred on Quantum Leap many years back, Scott Bolka, I think his name is.
I think that's right.
Book, yeah, and then of course now we have a Star Trek Discovery, and now we have this comedy animated series called Star Trek Lower Decks,
And
which is
we have
supposed to be like
Picard.
a, yeah, Picard with the continuations of Jean-Luc Picard from the Next Generation, played by Patrick Stewart.
Right.
Yeah, it's like both the last two one I mentioned are on the CBS Access channel there. It's like when you really think about it, the Star Trek franchise has not died, and I don't may never die because of the generations, the storylines, and some of the messages in the original series provoked it. I mean, when you think about it, here was a Canadian, an American, a Vulcan, a black lady, an Asian dude, a Scotsman, and a whole
And a
cast of
Russian.
others and a Russian working together as a unit, as one. No racism, no bigotry, none of that crap. It's all working together as a team.
Absolutely.
And which is something that is needed for today when you think about it. It concerns all the politics that's been going on with our pop culture and everyday lives being invaded by all that stuff there, then by all this. I mean, when you think about it, we also can't forget the Star Trek: The Motion Picture. When that first came out in 1979, they realized we'd look a lot older then, but the technology had improved into what they had on the original TV series.
Oh yeah. Even in that day, the technology was far above everything else. But compared to what they can do now, it's primitive.
Yeah, exactly. But then, I mean, they can imagine the original cast today. Well, basically, we have the original cast, but they're a lot younger, years younger, with some of the actors who portrayed the last few Star Trek movies directed by J.J. Abrams.
Right. Right.
Yeah, with the terms of technology, the character developments. Khan before he became Ricardo Montalban in the years before.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
The next episode we had was one called The Squire of Gothos, which again they go to a planet and they find somebody there that, for lack of a better word, starts acting a bit strange, and he's pretty much trying to control the landing party and what they can do and what they can't do, and things of that nature. And he gets real testy with them, and then finds out that he's essentially a child that got away from his parents, and they came and got him and brought him back and told the landing party, "Hey, we're sorry for what happened here. He's been a bad boy. We'll take care of him." And they kind of said, "Well, yeah, we kind of understand, but don't be too hard on him and all that." And that was after he'd pretty much treated him very badly. But
Yeah.
that's a good episode. It's good to watch. In fact, it's borderline very good. And next one was one called Arena. This one was absolutely very good. Damn near excellent, actually. Uh,
Mm.
there was a spaceship that attacked an outpost while the Enterprise was near, and the Enterprise went after him, chasing him, and was going to try to confront him and fight him and all of that. And they both came into an area where they were frozen and stopped, and the two leaders, which were Kirk and the captain of the other ship, who were a Gorn, which was a very big Tyrannosaurus Rex looking guy, and they
Hmm.
were told that they needed to fight it out, and whoever won, their ship would be spared, the other one would be destroyed. And
Uh-huh.
basically, this is explored Kirk trying to figure out how am I going to beat this guy. He's stronger than me. He's bigger than me. All of this stuff. And finally, he figured out a way to immobilize him. And basically, as he's going to go kill him, he says, "No, I can't do it. I can't kill him. He may have done this, he may have done that, but it's just, I can't kill him." And the beings show up and say, "After all, you guys are pretty good. Uh, and we're going to go ahead and spare both of you." And Kirk tells the guys, he says, maybe we just need to talk to him and figure out what happened. Maybe there's a problem we need to solve. And they basically, it's a very good episode. It's like I said, it's damn near excellent. It's good,
Hmm.
but that's worth seeing. Well, technically, all of them are.
Yes.
The next one's Tomorrow's Yesterday, which first explored time travel. The Enterprise went into some kind of thing where they got thrown back into the 60s, and basically it talked about, it kind of covered some of the time paradoxes, things of that nature, because an Air Force pilot saw him, and they had to beam him on board the Enterprise, and of course he found out everything, and he knew everything, and they were trying to figure out a way to fix this, where he wouldn't tell anybody. He said, well, maybe you need to come with us. And they explored history and found out, no, we can't do that. His son, that he hasn't even conceived yet, is going to be very important to the space program, and he needs to be there. So they had to figure out a way to get him back and yet let him forget what all he saw. And it was interesting the way they figured all of that out. So this is another episode that's at least very good. So I would recommend that one.
All right.
Court Martial is the next one. And in this one, Kirk is accused of jettisoning, in his past, jettisoning a life pod with his commander on board. Right, and he wasn't supposed to jettison it, and so he's put under court martial for that. And they go through the process of examining everything, examining all the records and such, and then discover that the records were doctored because the guy had survived. And so everything was doctored, and they figured that out. This is a good episode.
Yeah.
And the next one's Return of the Archons, which actually is very good. They go to a planet that their people are all being controlled, and they basically go around talking about being part of the brethren, and everybody's under some kind of a control, and some of the some of the Enterprise people get under this control. Sulu is the one I most remember about this. And essentially it turns out there was a computer doing all of this, and they had the lawgivers, which basically went around and made people bow to their will, and everybody was the same, and things of that nature. And so they fixed that problem and got that taken care of, and people went back to the way they were supposed to be. This is a good episode. Actually, I'll go very good on this episode. It was good.
Mm-hmm.
Now the next episode, Space Seed, is excellent. This is where we meet Khan. The Enterprise finds a ship with a bunch of people on it that are under suspended animation, and they go ahead and revive. I don't remember if they revived one or several of them, but they revived Khan, and it turns out he was leading a troop of some sort off, and no one survived but him and 5 or 6 others, or 6 or 7 others. And essentially he was trying to take things over or stuff like that. And as you probably know from the Star Trek movie, he was left on a planet to make his own way.
Yeah,
But
correct.
this is an excellent episode. It's worth watching. That way you can see the beginnings of Khan and how he began, why he was the way he was, and things of that nature.
Yeah.
It's a good one. And the next
Yeah.
one is A Taste of Armageddon. And this one, yeah, I'd call this very good, actually, because it basically talks about 2 planets that are at war with each other, but they're at war with each other with computer simulations. They're not actually at war. And what happens is, if one of the simulations tells the other simulation, hey, you had 100 people die, they had to march 100 people into chambers and kill them. I mean, it's a strange way of doing it, but it made the war sanitary and and it was very antiseptic, and it didn't cause any problems because everybody was comfortable with it. So these 2 countries had been fighting computer wars for years,
Mm-hmm.
and the Enterprise kind of was, this isn't going to do it. This ain't right. And so they destroyed or broke one of the computers, and then they said, what are we going to do? We've been at war all these years, and we can't do our thing anymore. We're going to have to really fight now. and basically told them, hey, then you'll get a taste of what it's really like. And they basically ended up deciding we don't want this, and they declared a, a peace, I guess you might say.
Yes.
And when they found out that war is not a good thing. And the next one was
Yeah.
one called This Side of Paradise, which essentially was another shore leave type planet where people went down and they got infected with spores from plants that made them just want to stay there. They didn't want to do anything else. They wanted to get rid of the Enterprise and they wanted to live on this planet forever or whatever. Because I guess the
Hmm.
spores needed them. And they ended up eventually beating the spores and getting their lives back. But this is a good episode, I think. It's well, like I said, the first season generally is worth watching. Next one is Devil in the Dark, and basically they landed on a mining planet where there was this creature going around that nobody ever saw that could dig through solid rock. I mean, it just kind of like blah, 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 and it dug through solid rock, and they weren't sure exactly how that was going on, but it was attacking the miners. And when they investigated it, they went after to find out what was going on, and they found out that there was these spores down there, which was this one beast's young that they were watching, and the miners, not knowing what they were breaking them, so essentially killing the eggs. And the monster, for lack of a better term, devil in the dark, was trying to protect the eggs and didn't really want to cause any problems. And they basically fixed that. And when they went up, the miners were kind of like, hey, these guys are making us rich. They're digging all these tunnels that we couldn't dig. And all the young have hatched. And boy, they're digging tunnels all over the place. And we're finding all kinds of stuff down here. So they're good. Once you get used to them, uh, they're kind of fun to be around. And Spock kind of laughed and said, when he mind melded, that was exactly what the creature said about the people. They were not much, they were kind of ugly to look at, but which is kind of ironic. Oh, that, whoa, sounded like you
Yeah.
dropped something.
What's wrong?
Sounded like you dropped something.
No, everything's going good. I'm still here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, everything's going good. All right. All right. We're going to take a break here from the episodes we're discussing here. But what do you think the impact? What do you think of? Excuse me. Now, as I mentioned a couple of times before, Star Trek is one of the big three big science fiction franchises out there in pop culture. Next, of course, Doctor Who, which came first,
Right,
and Star Wars, which came afterwards.
right. And
Yeah,
essentially with Star Wars, you do have some television shows, but they didn't have
yeah,
the impact of the movies, especially the middle
yeah,
three.
yeah, yeah. But I mean, when you think that, yeah, because remember we had about 13 movies. Star Wars had only about nine altogether.
Right.
But then again, like Star Trek, Star Wars has now become somewhat of a religion.
Yeah, and it's funny because there's really no other science fiction show I can think of that did this.
Yeah, and plus, with the messages and the ideas that was put in to those episodes that you mentioned there.
Right. Yeah, because the first season generally you're going to find as you watch them, the first season is right on track with what they were trying to do. The second
Yes.
season was still pretty close, and then the third season the network executives got involved for the most part,
Yeah.
and they weren't as good. There were good episodes, but
Mhm.
that's when you start hitting some of your fares. I can't recall whether I'm going to call anything poor or
All
not,
right.
but when we get
All
to
right.
them, I'll let you know.
All right. So because in a way we're gonna have to end the show. So I was told to have to get with my brother-in-law. We have to hit the road somewhere. Got to go a couple places there. So we figure we have about a few more minutes before we sign off here. So what do you? So when what do you? When did now Star Trek was canceled in 1969,
Right.
right? It originally ran on the NBC network, if I'm correct, right?
I believe that's correct, yes.
Yeah. Then the question is, what killed Star Trek, the series?
Essentially, I think the network executives meddling with it did that. If it had been
Yeah,
allowed to stay on course, I think it would have gained a large following. And
yeah.
it didn't get into some of the goofier aspects. I have no idea what it is about network executives, but for some reason they like to get into shows and kind of
Tinker.
meddle with them and
They
make
like to
them
get their inputs. They often do that. It's the same thing with Doctor Who right now. Too many people get adding too many ingredients into the soup when there really doesn't need any. I mean, because of course you got to remember how executives are when it comes to TV, movies, music. They like to add their input. They want to try to keep the franchise going. They want to keep that momentum as it is. But the thing is, some of the things that they're adding are not exactly that good. You know, you got to rely on good storylines, good messages, good ideas. And a lot of these executives, have the idea, have the audacity idea to think that they know what is right. They know which is which.
yeah,
I spoke about this before.
it's kind of funny because that's what happened with Star Wars.
Yeah,
The
I
middle
know
three
it.
episodes, or I guess technically how you look at them, the first
The
three episodes,
prequels.
the first
Yeah,
three episodes are the middle three, Star Wars.
yeah,
Those were the best ones. Then the ones they did later to kind of
yeah.
introduce
Episodes
us,
1 through 3. Yeah,
those were
the whole.
those were good in their own way, but they
Yeah,
weren't quite up to the standard. Well, in my own eyes, to the first three, and then they really went trashy on the seventh and eighth one, and the ninth one was an
yeah,
attempt to recover,
yeah.
but by then it was almost too late.
Yeah. But now it's kind of, but then again, we had all these programs like Star Wars Rebels, the Clone
Right.
Wars, and a lot of people have been saying it's those kind of shows that make you appreciate the prequels even more now. And
Yeah.
now with the Mandalorian and all this other stuff, and right now,
Well, we kind
Daisy
of
Ridley, John, the guy who played Finn, and of course Mark Hamill speaking about the way Disney was messing up with the franchise. It's kind of like this provoked it, of course, a lot of people at the Disney, and they possibly go get. I guess they already did. George Lucas, Dave Filoni, and this other person whose name escapes me. To get on board to try and make Star Wars as big as the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Well,
right.
yeah. So they're trying to do that, but it's going to take a long while, a lot of practice, a lot of hard work,
It's going
and
to
a
take
lot
a
of
lot to
correcting.
repair,
Yeah,
but we needed the first three episodes to kind of give us a story of how Darth Vader came about. So
yeah,
that
yeah. True.
helped with that. So
Yes.
they weren't up to the standards of the middle three, but they were close
Hmm.
enough that you kind of go, yeah, I can accept them. It's the third
Uh,
three that kind of gets you to go, what in the world are they doing?
yeah. And of course, just with the Star Trek with the movies that came out with directed by J.J. Abrams, taking back to
Right.
when the Enterprise crew first started out. It's kind of like a little bit tad, of course, a lot more advanced, tad different than what we see on the original series. Or it makes you wonder they go from the ship they had into the Enterprise that they had in the original series. There,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, because the Enterprise they had in the Abrams franchises. In the Abrams movies were like way advanced. The technology was way up there, and it's like we'll look at the original series, like wow, talk about a downgrading.
Yeah. Yeah. It's it. But, you have to remember what they had available to them at that time.
That's
So
true at that time.
obviously,
Yes,
it was way
and the
advanced for
idea
that
of
time.
yeah, and plus and I guess going back to all those episodes or adding all this with the CGI digital stuff there. Could it be like a little bit too out there? I mean, they already did it with Star Wars. They already did it with all these other movies, sci-fi movies out there.
Yeah.
And I guess the hardcore diehards out there would be like don't mess with the original series. Like don't do it. They'll probably no doubt scream and holler about that.
Yeah. But anyway,
Yeah.
let's tell the folks what we're going to do the rest of the week. 2 days.
Okay. Yes. Tomorrow night we'll continue our discussion on music memories. We're gonna probably dig into the 1950s there when the rock and roll scene first popped up.
And pretty much all we'll talk about is rock and roll in that particular episode. I'm thinking. We'll see
And
how
of
it goes
course,
and go from there.
tomorrow night, and of course the night afterwards, Friday night, we'll be discussing the movie Plan 9 from Outer Space, directed by Ed Wood, and one of the last movies to start the late great Bela Lugosi.
Yeah, they, folks, if you have not seen that movie, seriously, go find it and watch it, and you know what we're talking about. It's
Yeah,
bad, it's horrible, but it's worth seeing. Does that make
yes,
sense? Well, when you see it, you'll
got it
figure out why.
exactly. All right, there. Yeah, it's definitely, and we don't know what we have for planning for next week, pretty much here, except for our discussions on rock and roll and stuff.
Yeah, the
And we're
music
going,
one's pretty easy to follow because
yeah,
we're going to continue on through the history. And
yeah,
actually, the TV one's easy because we're going to be back on Star Trek again because we only got through about the first 19 episodes or so of the first season.
mhm,
So,
yeah. All right, and I know you got to continue the rest of them, and of course we'll have a discussion on where does Star Trek go from here.
yeah, we'll get into that too a
Yeah.
little bit.
Okay then. All right, so next week we'll continue our part two of the original Star Trek series there. And of course, we'll also get into our philosophies on the spin-offs that came afterwards, including the animated series from the 1970s, The Next Generation, Voyager, all those episodes, all
Yeah,
those programs. Yes, we definitely got to dig deep in those, man.
yeah, we might not get into details about each and every episode in any of those because,
Yes,
well, for instance, next generation's like 100 plus episodes. So,
that's true.
you
Yeah,
know, we'll be
but
here
it
for
did
months
last.
doing that one.
Yeah, and plus, how many? That's true because it did last longer than the original when you think about it. There.
Oh yeah. Well, it's funny
Yeah,
because I think pretty much all of them did.
yeah. That's true because that's how Star Trek has become, how big it has become when you think about it there.
Oh yeah.
All
Yeah.
right. So, okay, I guess we'll end the show right now. And then I'm going to be heading out with my brother in law, heading out to a couple of places here. All right.
Okay.
So, tomorrow night, we'll be here at an hour earlier before. We'll be doing this at 6 p.m. Eastern time here because the hour later I'm going to be pre part of Real Fuck TV with Minnesota Vikings fan and a Minnesota Silver Roll hunter.
And
And
everybody that's listening to this, or will
yeah,
listen to it later,
yeah,
tell your friends and neighbors. Join up.
yeah,
We're gonna go on with this as long as we both can.
yeah, yeah, definitely. And also, so I'm going to tell everybody to subscribe to Arknolia's channel. It's simply called Arknolia Stroke of Bean. And he has this episode along with my channel as well. So subscribe to that. And for myself and Arknolia, um, you guys have a good one, okay?
Yeah.
Uh,
And we'll talk to you later.
all right, bye bye.